So I've been going through a bit of you can call it transmutation, whatever it is. And it's actually led me to go into presence, and I've been kind of processing it. You know, it's like whether it's like, am I identifying with it again? But then I realize also that the path that I'm in order for me to shine, is to embrace everything. That includes not only my sexuality, but the sexual humor and the dark humor. I wouldn't say often have, because the thing is, being human, we like to put things in boxes, right? And I can sense right here that the ego, that it wants to release itself. But that's where I also have to acknowledge that it's like, well, yeah, the ego needs to fucking release itself, but not in ways that it's unconscious anymore, where it's actually, how do you call this, more triggering to others, where it's not, it causes more like trauma, because there is a choice, that needs to be made. Like I can choose whether do I go back to the way it was, which I feel like I can't do anymore. When I see the way it was this whole, if you don't accept me, then fuck you. No, it doesn't work that way anymore, because that's just more resistance as well. I do notice that there are certain things and certain people that that I have, and I still, I'm pretty sure will trigger, because one of the things I do is I joke about sex. I joke about sexual things. It could be anything from farting to shit to piss to fucking to anything that's sexual, sexuality itself. And it can be very triggering for a lot of people. That's because, in truth, I used to be like that, where I used to get triggered by many sexual things too. And then I realized that it's like, I can see why it's triggering me, because I didn't embrace my sexuality. Growing up Catholic, it was like, you can't be that way. It's okay to be gay as long as you don't have to show it. It's like, what does that mean, right? But there's a difference between back then and now, where it's like, do I sink to that level of like defending myself? I could, but then again, that's just unconscious. But even then, the way it works is that life is as it is, and the universe, whatever you want to call it, is all encompassing, all embracing, unconditional. There's no punishment. There's no like, oh, if I abstain from sex, which is like an extreme. Well, it can be, but if I abstain from sex, where it's like completely like just like, like not even with a partner, and then it's just like, oh, because it's wrong, then the feeling is heavy, and it's very like unconscious on its own. It's spiritual ego. The opposite is, I'm just gonna fuck everything that's moving. And that's the ego, right? So, but again, even the fact that we're saying like, oh, well, we gotta get rid of the ego, we gotta like suppress it and all that shit, right? That's just more ego. So the key, I realized, because I was going through it last night, and I was processing the whole, like, I got triggered again by having these thoughts of like, being left out, being not suppressed per se, but more like having to diminish how I joke about things, because joking for me is a fun thing. It's fun, it's joyful, it's fun. It's not trying to be insulting. I don't do insulting things. It's not an attack when I joke about things, I like it to be lighthearted and fun. But you come across situations and people that feel like, well, there's a feeling of like this tendency to like point fingers, right? I'm like, well, that's not for me to do. It's better to, when I say better, I mean it's more, as you get into this whole like process of really like awakening. We can call it just awakening, but basically it's a realization. It's elevation of consciousness, meaning you're just growing. um, you start to realize that it's like, well, that doesn't work because that's also more resistance. If you get triggered and you resist what is you are triggering, then you become the trigger itself. I don't know if that makes sense, but the point is that it's always bringing attention to it. And so something that happened while I was doing it was like, I got this, I believe it was my spirit guide. I don't know if it's an animal guide or a spirit guide, but it was just like it showed up again because I was processing the whole thing. I had to let the emotions go through. And then I saw something else. Um, I'll have to ask. I feel like I should have asked, but I don't know. Anyways, it was wonderful. I was just like, let's just say it felt very Native American. It was very beautiful. It was very serene, it was very calm, very like still. I think I was just getting this reminder. At least it was just this reminder of like, be in it, work with the stillness, and literally like surrender through that suffering, where it's no longer becomes suffering. It's got, I don't know. It felt quite dissolved after all that. I couldn't actually sleep last night. So, and it was just like this whole, when you're at death's door, knocking on your door, and someone is triggering you, or someone is angry at you, or you're really experiencing trauma again, whatever, there's this natural disaster, you're about to die, someone you love is about to die, you're losing things, you're losing your job, you're you're about to die because of unhealth, something wrong with your health or whatever it is. All those traumatic things, it's just all ego. Because the ego is afraid of dying. The ego is attached to form, right? You've heard this time and time again. But unless you really experience it, it's not going to be really understood. So my point is that one thing is that even though I could tell you, do not let anyone diminish your brightness and your childlikeness, there's another side to that where it's just like, you will encounter that. The more you shine, the more darkness comes through. And it's not because people are dark. Well, apparently there are people who just have no souls, but I don't know. But the point is that everything under the universe meaning it's all embracing, it's all encompassing. So even the dark things, or the dark, what we like to categorize as like evil people, are part of this too. Are part of this too. So, because it was watching this podcast on how the next level soul, and this is one guest he had recently. Alex Ferrari had this one guest recently, and she was talking about the whole like, it rang a bell for me. It was this whole like, something about, let me go back here. She said something about when you're in that state of surrender. Something about something coming through. It'll come back to me. I don't know I don't remember the exact words, but it'll come back to me. So the point I was making is that when we bring awareness into something, into the light. Okay, now I remember. So when we're seeing someone that's triggering us, when we shine the light of awareness, meaning like we bring awareness to it, and it really heals. It actually very heals quickly. It heals things quickly. And how that works for me is, I literally like, observe it, and it's like so. And I actually have like these. It feels like observational, logical sort of thoughts, and I wondered, it's like, why is that person getting triggered? It's like, okay, I can understand. But here's the thing. I kept getting the message, it's like, do not diminish, do not diminish. It's just like stand in your ground and just be yourself. So I was just like, huh, okay. It was like this relief that I got. And then after that, I started to fall asleep because I was just like, okay, now I get it. And it was just a wonderful experience of like this complete. It's not an understanding. It was just kind of like this inner knowing that was like. This, I think this is the thing that my father's been telling me all this time. You know, when you have compassion for others. That's the thing about being human, right? It's usually typically hard to have compassion for others. That's because we haven't learned to have compassion for ourselves. What we work on the inside reveals itself on the outside. So by seeing why I would get triggered, for example, like being unaccepted or questioned or suppressed or questioned or misunderstood or to this extreme degree like ostracized, banished, to the point of like even death and killed and murdered and slain and skinned alive and all that horrible things. Like why people would do that. Why a person, like not so much why they would do that, not questioning it as if it's like they shouldn't do that. It's not the energy of like why are you doing that? Meaning like that. It's an energy of like you shouldn't do that. More like why? It's out of curiosity. Why is a person or why would a certain person do that? That's because there's something that's in them that is getting triggered by your shine. So if you're shining and it feels light and it doesn't, you know, you're not, it's not in any way harming others, you know, because one of the things I kind of question sometimes is like, am I being inappropriate? Am I being, um, like, how do you draw the line between, you know, I've heard this before. It's like, how do you draw the line between inappropriate and, um, what's the other one? What's the word I'm looking for? Inappropriate and hurtful. Let's just put it that way. Well, if it's inappropriate, it just, it's kind of like, this whole conditioning of like, you must wear uniform for this occasion. If you look at what's beyond that, it's like, what is it for? I mean, you could accept it and just like go with it and just flow with it. But at the same time, we do realize, we know this inner knowing or this like sort of this instinct is kicking in. It's like, yeah, this is ridiculous. What is with like what? Why? You know? So it's not so much about resisting it in either direction, which is like I'm just gonna conform to it, which is like resisting yourself or resisting your own self, like you know what feels natural to you, or at least for me, or resisting the whole thing. And it's like I fucking hate that, blah, 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 blah. And it's like, I don't like that, wearing suits and, you know, wearing uniforms, and why do you have to do it? Like for an interview, for example. Something kind of mundane and simple. So, it's funny because you think about it, it's like, okay. But non-resistance, where it's just like, okay, when it's in the situation that's you're already in. Because you know when there's a part of you that doesn't want that. Where you say, okay, that's your thing. You feel like that's what you have. I personally don't agree with that. Then you leave it at that, right? But as humans, we're social beings, right? For the most part, I say. Okay, to me, it's like for the most part. But it's like, so my being inappropriate has nothing to do with me actually being inappropriate. That for me, what is inappropriate is actually something that causes actual harm to somebody. Trauma, physical pain, that creates more of that stuff. But if it's something that is only triggering to someone, as if it's like there's almost like this energy of I'm intending to harm you because I'm supposedly being inappropriate, then that's not on me. Meaning that's not on the shining. Because I know when I shine and I feel like I'm just being funny and being silly, all that stuff, like, and I do present all that sexual energy as well, even the dark stuff. I do that, but I'm not gonna go look for and harming others with it. I'm not gonna push some sort of agenda, the dark agenda, or some sort of like, because that's what people who get triggered might have. I'm not saying that they do have it, might have. We're just like, okay, they get triggered by it. I can't control that. But what I can control is how I react to it. What I can also control is not to suppress what feels like a natural joy. For me, this is a natural joy too. I don't need to talk about sex all the time because that would just be too much, right? Then that's just kind of pushing things because it's like, that's where you kind of just like, there's that whole limit thing, or there's that line that you have to draw. It's that the line is necessary where it's actually causing harm. Where I'm like literally the energy when you push it, and you're just like, it's like I need to be right. That's ego. But if it's just like pure fun and joy, and it's kind of just, it still triggers people, that's something you cannot control. Something, shining comes in different forms. And for some, like myself, it goes into what some people might consider the darker side of things. And it triggers a lot of people. Can't control that. So I've actually let go of some of those people before. We're just like, okay. It kind of hurts though. It kind of hurts to a certain degree. Now it's more like it's still there. I can sense it, and it does trigger the whole like I feel like not ostracized but kind of excluded. It's an Eris thing, I suppose. Being a Libra, it's because we don't like being ostracized. We don't like being excluded. But that's still an ego thing. But am I being ostracized? Um, am I what do you call it? Am I being excluded? No. Um, but at the same time, if I have to be excluded, so-called excluded, at the if I have to be included at the expense of feeling natural and like just shining, full of that joy, the childlike joy of like joking about things and like, you talk about fart, you talk about penises, all that stuff. For some people, they get triggered because it feels immature to them. But deep within that it's just like, I'm not triggering anything. I'm just being myself. And that's where the whole thing comes in, where you have, these thousands of years of suppression. A lot of these things that were just simple joys of life got suppressed because they get triggered. Because there's an aspect of themselves that they did not accept and they haven't worked on it. And that's okay. So my thing is just like shine. Shine your own way. Shine, shine, shine. You are no less, a flower is no less than a flower, no more than just a flower. The flower will shine as itself. You'll know when it feels natural because it doesn't feel like a pressure. It doesn't feel like you're conforming to whatever everyone else thinks, or even the stories in your head, the beliefs in your head, the beliefs, the stories of the conditioning and all that stuff, right? It just feels natural. And it's just like, just today I was just cleaning I got these, like these little rubber thimbles, and I wanted to cover these nails because I want to protect the nails, just kind of preserve them as I'm doing things. Let's say I'm like maybe typing or doing something. But then I was like, when I wash them, I still wash things. So, and then I released them because you know how rubber goes bloop. I laughed at it. And it was just like this joyful moment. It's like bloop. You know when you're a kid and you like sort of like bubbles? It's kind of like that thing. You enjoy the simple things of like this natural phenomenon of reaction of elements and how rubber reacts and all that stuff. It's joy. So that's the whole thing. You'll know if it's you're shining when it feels like joy. It feels like I can feel this warmth of energy coming through me, and it's just like this wonderful reminder of like the joy. Find the joy inside, and it'll come through on the outside. There will be people who get triggered by that joy because they don't have it in their lives, and that's okay. So shine with all that joy. I wish you guys well. Thank you, and I'm glad that I got to share this one because it feels like there's a part of me that wanted to kind of make this all about ego kind of thing. There was this push of just like, I gotta be right. I'm like, I don't have to be right. In fact, I think being wrong is a natural experience of mine. It's not natural, but it's like I'm used to it because I know that when I shine in certain ways, specifically when it's like joy and it triggers others, this has been going on for like my whole life. Um, it's okay because that means you're doing the right thing. So, wish you guys well. With all much love, thank you for watching. Bye.